The sleeper has awoken.
Welcome back to Nerd Legion. Yet again, DoA, we are stepping back in time. Did you know that this year, the year of our Lord 2024, is now 40 years since the release of David Lynch's Dune film from 1984? So
that's the whole plan, right? We were like, oh, it's the 40th anniversary. That's why we got to do it, obviously. Yeah.
It's coincidental that Dune 2 came out, the same year. And so we're going to go back and look at the original Dune. If you guys missed it, we also did a Nerd Legion on the new Dune Part 2 movie by Denis Villeneuve. And we are also doing a Denis Villeneuve arc on Foreplay. That should be coming up. So you guys can all look forward to that. Actually, by the time this is out, the first episode of that should also be out. So remember to subscribe to the channel, obviously. But we are going back in time to the original Dune.
Oh, yes.
A little bit surprising, this film.
It's a little bit different. A little bit different. Than
but I do think that if you have just watched the new Dune movies, that this is actually kind of a fun watch back to see another interpretation of the story. It's actually a great time to rewatch this. I hadn't seen this in probably 20 years. So
same. I think I saw this when my dad showed it to me and my siblings when we were like in maybe like middle school or something like that. Which is kind of weird for a middle schooler to watch this film. It's I'm surprised it didn't mess me up. But I told you already that I had the pop-up book when I was a kid of this film. In fact, hold on one second. I don't usually do this in the broadcast, but hold on.
He's gonna go get it. So obviously David Lynch, at this point in his career, had done Eraserhead and Elephant Man, but this was before he got kind of more famous for Twin Peaks, Blue Velvet, and then much later on Mulholland Drive. So this was kind of the start of David Lynch's career. He had gotten enough cred to do a big budget sci-fi film. Yeah, and this is what he wrought.
And we got this pop-up book out of it. I went on eBay and I bought a mint condition 1984 Dune pop-up book. It used to retail for $6.95. That's a lot for 1984, but the quality is worth it. It's the pop-up. It says pop-up panorama book for Dune. See, colorful 3D scenes with punch-out characters and vehicles, all based on the spectacular movie. That's right. So
does it have a punch-out Patrick Stewart?
It does. I'm pretty sure it does. Yeah, I'm not going to punch it out. Where's the punch-out Patrick Stewart? It doesn't. Wait. It only has Dr. Yue. Okay, so we're gonna
boo.
These are the punch out things. It's got Paul Atreides, Lady Jessica, Duke Leto, Baron Harkonnen, Phaedra, Raban, Reverend Mother, Aaliyah, Chani, and Dr. Yue. The traitor got a spot. but not Patrick Stewart. Maybe he's
Gurney Halleck.
Hold on. There's another page of things in the back, but this is just Thopters. And there's a highliner you can pop out, because the idea is you pop these out and then you use them in your dioramas. Ta-da!
Whoa, that's actually cool.
Look at that! Isn't that amazing? Yeah,
it actually is very cool.
Pops up. It's awesome. So I had a copy of this book when I was a kid. I guess it was my dad's. He was really into pop-up books apparently in the early '80s.
As all grown men like us are.
Yeah,
Once you become a dad, you get very interested in pop-up books.
I definitely have recently over the last 10 months for sure. But yeah, so like I talked about how the art in that really struck me. And so it was really fun reading through the pop-up book again. Maybe I'll do a read through for the channel and seeing the film, right? Seeing the inspiration for the pop-up book, which is what this film's most known for, of course. But let's start at the beginning of Dune 1984, shall we? With the wonderful intro by Princess Irulan, where
Irulan,
right? Yeah, Irulan, whatever. And Irulan, whatever. But she's introducing the world to us, and one of the best moments in the movie happens at the beginning, where she's like, "Oh yes, I almost forgot," and then tells you about like the planet Dune and all that. It's like, why did you have this character almost forget to tell us the entire setup we need for the entire movie?
Oh yes. I forgot to tell you. The spice, exists on only one planet in the entire universe. The planet is Arrakis, also known as Dune.
You know, it's like,
DoA, I had the exact same thought watching that. I was dying. I was dying
Yeah.
laughing because it's even better than that, DoA. The beginning of this film is so ridiculous. You know, in a way, I actually appreciate the intro narrative. First off, because the framing device is actually what's used in the book Dune too, because the chapters start with quotes from Princess Irulan's writing that provide a lot of context to the world and about Paul Muad'Dib and all this other stuff, right? So it actually is in keeping with the tone of the book. So I don't hate it as a result of that. But it's the way that it's done that is so comical, as you say, because it's not that she's like, oh, I forgot. It's that she just appears in space and then she fades in and out several times. And then she fades out and then she fades back and she's like, I forgot, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the planet Dune? And
before
the spice melange before I go. I'm like, where are you going? You're just floating in space. So in that way, it's like the opening crawl to Star Wars. By the way, all three of the original trilogy had come out by the time this film was released, because Return of the Jedi was 83. And it you know, if you think about this film on its own, it may not be so bad, but if you compare it to Star Wars and consider that the entire trilogy had already been released, it looks really bad. And
it's a bit rough.
Yeah, instead of having the text of the opening crawl like in Star Wars, what you have is Irulan just floating in space, fading in and out, and being like, I almost forgot. And I was like, why would you?
It's in this monotone too.
Yeah.
Right. She's like, I almost forgot a planet called Dune exists. And it's very important. And then fade out, come back. Oh, yes, one more thing.
But why would you?
Choice.
My first question, I'm glad you led with this, DoA, because I just absolutely died laughing over this, is why would you even write it this way? What characterization does it bring to Princess Irulan to just say, I almost forgot? Is she supposed to be forgetful? Is that what we're going for here?
It's a pretty important part of her life too, you know, as things go on. So I don't think this is the type of thing she would like be prone to forgetting, you know, the planet that is the source for the spice that enables your entire culture, essentially. So it's an odd thing to forget, Princess Irulan. But sometimes, you know, when you're in the upper crust of society, you have a lot of things weighing on your mind. You forget the basic stuff, you know?
Well, it's also funny because the frame device in Dune is supposed to be Irulan telling the story of her husband. And you would think, how could she possibly forget the central part of her life? I don't know, where, you know, Paul Atreides took power and controlled the entire universe and married her. I would have thought that would be really, how could you possibly forget that?
You'd think so. Although, you know, at the very end of the film, and I want to go through things in chronological order, but at the end of the film, there's no mention of him marrying her at all. By the way, they kind of gloss over that part.
That's
he's
because
thoroughly
it was too
with Chani.
It was too spicy in the 80s to have Paul Atreides with Chani and then be like, by the way, DoA, it's too spicy now. Marriage. It's politically too spicy now, which is why they did it. Yes, it's why they did it the way they did in the Villeneuve film, which is that Chani is all sassy and offended. Meanwhile, Book Chani's just like, got to do your duty. I know she's just a token bitch. I'm the real bitch, so I'm cool with this. Like,
she gets over it fast. In the book,
you know, Irulan is the side hoe. Let's be very clear. So they have to be married because he's consolidating imperial power. But Chani knows in the book that she is the true object of Paul Atreides' affections. But they couldn't even show that in the film. She has to get all mad about it. But she's not mad in the book.
Yeah. So we'll get to more of that, because I feel like there's a lot of the very 1980s, you know, like hero. I think it wanted to be a heroic story like Star Wars, which is strange because we talked about Dune kind of being the anti-Star Wars, right? And no, don't compare Paul to Anakin. It's not the same thing. I saw you doing that in the chat. It's not that. But back to let's go back to the beginning of the movie. We'll get to all that stuff later. So it's going, and I'm like, I forgot how much I love the theme in this movie, where it's dun 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 dun. You know, it's a really cool theme. And then it comes up, music by Toto, and I forgot. The 80s pop band Toto did the soundtrack for this, which is wild, right? Because if you're not familiar
They
with Toto,
didn't bless the rains down in Arrakis.
Exactly.
By the way, they could have made a
there's
cover
no
of
rain
that
in
song. Yeah,
Arrakis.
I bless the rains down in Arrakis.
Right.
Sounds
They're
good.
the band. They're the band that did Africa. If you are familiar with this band, like I bless the rains down in Africa, or that's them. So they did the soundtrack for Dune, which it's
Also
not
Brian.
really
I think Brian Eno did the theme. So when I was watching it, I think Brian Eno, who's a famous producer, did the theme. And Toto did the rest of the soundtrack, which is painfully obvious as you watch this movie. So the orchestral theme was not, as far as I know, done by Toto. That was Brian Eno,
I would like to believe that it is, so I will continue to do so. But when the influence of Toto is felt to the max when the very inappropriate, distorted guitar riffs come in randomly, then it's Toto. And every time the guitar showed up, and I was like, what is this? We don't need that got a little bit too 80s sci-fi for me, right? Where it's like what a lot of people don't remember, and we didn't experience in our lives because it became the standard, was that before Star Wars, it was pretty common for like synth music, rock and roll. That was the soundtrack for science fiction stuff, right? Star Wars kind of did something unorthodox by having an orchestral score, and that became the norm. So that's what we grew up with. So we don't really know that. But if you go back and look, I have read, and if you see other movies from the 70s and 80s in the science fiction vein, it's a lot of rock and synth stuff. So this movie, I feel like, was kind of caught in a weird nether realm between the two, and the theme works, but the rest of the music has problems, I think, whenever the guitar shows up.
I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey also famously used classical musical pieces, like Thus Spake Zarathustra and stuff like that. But I agree. A lot of these films from this era, which are sci-fi, were not using orchestral, and certainly, not original orchestral scores.
Aliens. Yeah. Yep.
Blade Runner.
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the things that strikes you right off with this movie as it starts is just how incredible the costumes are with everything. It's like they really kind of go to the max, and this movie's a lot grosser than Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Denis Villeneuve's Dune is lived in, but it's also very clean. It's also
cool.
Yeah, it looks neat. This just looks dirty and gross for the most part. Even to the extent where the Reverend Mothers have their heads shaved in this kind of off-putting way. I will say the Reverend Mother has a really incredibly shaped head. Her skull is so round. If you're gonna be bald, that's the kind of skull you want in your head, because she looks good bald. It's a weird costume choice again, but she's got the head to pull it off at least. Freaky lady, but really great shaped head. I wanted to point that out too. But the costumes really struck me.
Yeah, I think my complaint about the costumes would mostly be the House Atreides military costumes. They're just kind of boring. They're not bad. They're just a little bit boring. But I think a lot of the design choice, I mean, the design is really hit or miss. I will also say, DoA, that the Sardaukar and the Spacing Guild costumes looked like they were following the derelict fashion line from Zoolander.
They are wearing trash bags. It's true. There is that.
They're actually just wearing plastic trash bags and running around.
But the tank with the navigator is incredible. And when you see the set stuff, the set and the costuming, some of it is a little bit low effort. But the stuff that they put effort into is amazing.
No, the sets are pretty garbage, and a
No!
lot of the practical effects
sets are great.
A lot of the practical effects are really hit and miss. So the Space Guild navigator is terrible. It's so bad.
I love that.
No,
I love that though.
Bad. It looks
so bizarre though.
Look, the concept looks bizarre. It's just executed extremely poorly. And David Lynch just chooses to do a million zoom ins on its obviously fake eyes as it just blinks there.
The mouth opening and closing. Did you get enough of that through the movie?
Yeah, and the mouth opening
orifice?
and closing, the orifice that just looks incredibly vaginal. And
the orifice is a little bit disturbing.
I'm no, I don't want to look at that anymore. And also,
the beam of light comes out. I'm like, which end is this? What am I looking at?
I'm
It's
old Greg.
Very disturbing.
It
is
there you
old
go.
Greg-esque in a way, isn't it? Yeah.
The beam of light coming out is definitely old Greg-esque. Shout out if you know the Mighty Boosh and that reference.
Oh
That's a
my.
deep cut, guys. But if you know
That
it,
is.
that would have been hilarious for you.
That's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
But the practical effects, like, I enjoy the design. It's just painfully clear that this film was over ambitious compared to the technology of the time, which also, when you watch the Villeneuve film, really throws that into stark relief. And it's not David Lynch's fault. I mean, you're just coming up. Dune is an incredibly difficult story to film because of the scope of it. And if you have an original story like Star Wars, you can tailor the scope of the story to the technology. And also, obviously, George Lucas was uniquely brilliant and had uniquely brilliant people with the start of Industrial Light and Magic for designing Star Wars. But this one, you actually have to have these giant biological creatures and freaky things that aren't just people in costumes a lot of the time. So it becomes much harder. You know, doing the sandworms is mandatory to doing Dune, and you can't just like change them into something else and have the story function. So it is really, really tough, I think, to do this. And a lot of Dune is also psychological, which is the expansion of consciousness. And honestly, some of these shots, though, I really enjoyed. So, for example, when Paul Atreides is drinking the water of life and his consciousness is like expanding out into the universe, and he's like lying there on the ground and all in the field of stars, it's actually like pretty cool, especially for the time period.
Traveling without moving. Now I truly control the worm and the spice.
It does work. And you know, even with the Navigator, there are corny aspects to it, but I love the ambition. And this is, I think, something that like it's very me, and that like I don't part of me is able to sort of like discount the corniness of some of it because I appreciate all the work that clearly went into it. So when they roll out like the big tank that the Navigator is in and everything, and they're walking on each side of it, I'm like, that's a really cool like image to show. And they, you know, there's some of it that looks very 80s and very corny, right? But if you take it as a whole and what they were doing with it, that's really cool. They built this gigantic tank, this massive puppet to go inside it and all that. Like that's neat. I love that kind of stuff.
The tank design is also really cool. The tank design is also really cool. Some of the set designs are very cool. Like I love the sets on Caladan with all of the wood paneling. Those are pretty cool. You know, the sets on Arrakis are pretty cool. The sets on Gidi Prime in the Room of Green are really bad.
Skip that one. Yeah. That one I have nothing positive to say about.
Just a bunch of ginger guys in a room. It's just like Christmas in there, DoA, with their red hair against the green walls, and Sting just glistening naked in his leather underwear, standing there like this with his
right.
Fade.
Yeah, I know. It's very odd. He's like, oh, yes, check out my leather thong. But and Baron Harkonnen, you know, to be fair, that is what he wants to check out. So Sting just playing to the crowd there, you know. He's known to do that. But my favorite shot in the film, one last thing on the set, is when the ships are flying into the door of the Highliner, and it's this big ornate like Victorian door in space, and you're like, that is such a cool image that you have all this ornateness built into it. I want more, and that's very 40K too, to a certain extent. I want more science fiction like that.
Yeah, it's ornate and gothic.
I love that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think the strongest points of design is the ship design. The transports. Honestly, one of the best shots in the film is when you get a really good sense of scale when they're leaving Caladan, and you see all of the transports, like hundreds of them, going into the big ship where they're going to fold space and make the move to Arrakis. Because you realize,
very artistically done.
And that's the scale of Dune, where you're moving an entire planet full of people, basically, a huge noble house that controls this entire world and all of its military and everything in one ship. And it really goes to show like how big these ships are, how big this process is, how important it is, the number of people that are involved in the scope. I thought those shots that David Lynch cooked up were really, really effective at doing that. Even more effective, I think, than the Villeneuve film at getting a sense of the number of people that are headed on this journey.
But then it's like you have that, and that looks really cool. And then you have the sequence where the navigator is actually folding space, and it's like this little slug thing flying through space and like eating things and shooting beams out of its orifice and all that. And I'm like, I couldn't stop laughing at that scene. I'm like, this looks so dorky. But yeah, so then you've got that. So this movie really kind of is a roller coaster of awe, where it's like one shot is very like amazing, like, oh, like, holy crap, this looks amazing, and then you've got orifice, beams from the orifice, But in the scene at the beginning when the navigator is talking to the emperor, he just gives away the entire plot. Like there's a lot of the over-exposition at the beginning of this movie. There's Paul sitting at the computer and he's like, data on Dune, and it's just the old-fashioned, the computer gives it, Dune, desert planet, native people, the Fremen, and you're like, you're watching him essentially Googling Arrakis, and you're like, this.
To be fair, that happens in the Villeneuve film too. That happens in the Villeneuve film too.
It's done better though. I feel like it's not just him sitting in front of the computer.
In this one, he's sitting in front of like this augmented reality projector in the Villeneuve film. It looks different, but it's basically the same scene.
It's more flashy, but like the Emperor is just like, hey, I'm planning on giving it to them so that the Harkonnens can come in and do it, and then I can get rid of House Atreides. But he just explains it to the navigator, and I can't remember if that scene happens in the book, because that would be the type of scene to happen in the book itself. It doesn't. Okay, so then that was just terrible. That was just like, hey,
not that I recall.
Here's the whole plot, So there was way too much just blatant spoken exposition in the beginning of this film.
Then, at an appointed time, Baron Harkonnen will return to Arrakis and launch a sneak attack on House Atreides. I have promised the Baron 5 legions of my Sardaukar terror troops.
Yeah. I think, though, that's the way you get this into a film that is 2 hours and 15 minutes long.
I guess.
And we talked about, in our discussion about Dune, some of my complaints, such as eliminating the Mentat storylines. And this goes to show, guys, why Villeneuve did that is because he had 2 movies. And one of those movies was longer than this movie. Just one of them was like Dune 2 was like 3 hours long. This one's 2 hours and 15 minutes. And basically, I think, DoA, you have to give all this exposition. You have to like push it along because it very much is a tell, don't show movie. Whereas Villeneuve took the show, don't tell approach, which is why the vibes are so much better and like flawless in the Villeneuve films. But, part of it, too, was that as somebody who's read the books, I can fill in all of the gaps in my mind, which is what I said about the Villeneuve film. So it doesn't bother me as much, or like I don't have as many questions as to, what's funny, DoA, is that even in this film, they don't get around to the fact about why people don't have computers.
Yeah.
Which is a core part of the Dune world. And neither movie addresses this whatsoever.
It's core, but at the same time, if you're telling this story, you can also just kind of be like, well, this is the way it is. We're not going to explain it. You just have to accept that this is the universe, So I get why. And I think it's, again, you're just trying to avoid those scenes like we saw where like it's just Paul visits the exposition computer, or you just have the navigator.
Or Irulan forgets to give you the key piece of exposition. And
I almost forgot.
She vanishes like a Force ghost and then just shows back up.
Yeah. So we get there. We set up everything, and then we have to introduce Gurney Halleck. We have to introduce Patrick Stewart and everything like that, who looks basically exactly like he does in the Next Generation. Only he's wearing like an Atreides suit. So this
Next Gen started, I think, the same. It started the same year, 84.
Right.
So this would have been the first season of Next Generation.
So his character looks exactly the same. And then like he challenges Paul to a fight where they put on what I can only describe as Minecraft body generating devices. and they have like a Minecraft battle in Dune. And I'm saying Minecraft because they look like Minecraft characters. They use the belt thing, and their shield just makes like blocks around their limbs, and so they're doing a thing, and you can't really see them. It obscures them so much you can't even see the characters. So you just see these blocky characters flailing at each other, and one like flies across the floor and stuff. They look like Minecraft characters fighting.
Now, guard yourself from truth.
As someone who has high school casting interns that cast Minecraft Bed Wars, I've watched a lot of Minecraft for the last few years. It looks like a Minecraft fight. They just walk up and they're just hitting each other like this, and then one of them falls over. Like it's
It's
great.
also that the Minecraft suits refract the lights, so you can't even see what's going on inside. Because
No.
it's like it's terribly designed and terribly done, and it makes the fighting so incredibly anticlimactic. And it's especially funny when they're fighting for real and they kill off Duncan Idaho because he gets shot in the head, but you can't really tell.
You don't really know. You're like, what happened to him?
I'm like, I guess Duncan Idaho
all
just
right.
died. They did Duncan dirty
Yeah.
in both of the film versions. Noah, he actually
They
is
did.
an important character in the books, and in the films, Jason Momoa like gives Paul Atreides a hug and then goes off and dies to the Sardaukar. And in this one, he doesn't even die to the Sardaukar. So at least in the Villeneuve films, he dies in the right place. In
Right.
this one, they just kill him off immediately in the attack on Arrakeen, the city, and
Yeah.
he dies in his Minecraft suit, and it's very funny.
Like, I mean, maybe when we get Dune Messiah, then spoiler alert, all the Duncan fans can be happy again, maybe. But like, yeah, the Minecraft shield generator did not work well. Again, I appreciate the effort. I appreciate what they were trying to do. It looked very unique. I'd never seen anything like that until Minecraft came out. But you just can't
It looks
see what
really
people are
stupid.
doing, so it looks terrible. Yeah. One thing I forgot that the Denis Villeneuve film didn't have at all was the sound weapons.
Yeah.
Which is in the books, I believe, right? But it's,
Yes, I believe so.
it's got to be, right? But it's so, seeing them in action in this film, you realize that they're so goofy that Denis Villeneuve is just like, nah, too goofy. And I agree. It's way too hard to make something like that.
No.
look
The
cool,
weirding modules were not in the book. David Lynch made that up. That was weird.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, I couldn't remember. I couldn't
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
or not, because it's been more than a few years since I read Dune. So when I watched this version of the film, I was like, okay, is this stuff in the book or not? But
No.
that was a David Lynch invention.
Yep.
Why? Why would you invent this goofy technology that looks silly when it's, yeah. I mean, especially then where it's like the guy's like, Muad'Dib, and his like gun is shooting. It's like, oh man, just saying his name kills people now. It's like,
It was a very
Okay.
weird addition. Okay.
Mr. Lynch. Really? We did. Okay, so that was a strange addition then. Yeah. They definitely did not keep that for the Denis Villeneuve.
By the way, this was another. The shields were another factor where you really appreciate the technology that exists now to create Villeneuve's Dune, because the shields are explained in a very specific way in the book that is almost identical to the Villeneuve film. And, they
Yeah.
tried to do that. They tried to represent it, but you really needed the modern tech. And the new shields look absolutely incredible. The visual designs on the new shields is so cool. So
because it's how the book describes it, where it's just a
Yep.
shimmer kind of
Yes.
like over your body. Like you can barely see it's
I mean, we
there,
all have
you know?
different
Yeah.
definitions of the word shimmer. Some of them may result in Minecraftification.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sometimes you just think of shimmer and you think of like big blocky bodies flailing at each other. That's true. Nothing about this movie that starts off really.
I
Oh, go
also feel bad for the fight choreographer who, underneath those blocks, probably had a really cool fight that we never got to see.
yeah. They probably practiced a lot, and then he sits down to
And
watch
David
the premiere, and
Lynch
he's
is
like,
time to put blocks
"Can't
on
see
it."
anything." That poor guy. We should send him a sympathy card. I'm sure your choreography was great. None of us got to see it, but one thing that starts early on and carries through this whole film too is that you have a lot of you hear a lot of the thoughts of characters, where it's the classic, you just kind of slow zoom on the character where they're just like this, and you hear the thought like, I bet he's actually going to try to kill Paul, or something like that, and I'm on the fence about whether that works or not, because I feel like I've seen it work sometimes in film and television, and I feel like even in this movie it does work. Like you can clearly tell you're hearing their thoughts, right? Sometimes it comes off as goofy when the actor just stops talking and just stares, and you hear that, sometimes it's goofy, but other times it like really works. And I don't know, what do you think about this means of displaying the characters' thinking thoughts? I'm on the fence about this.
I think it's just a way to make the plot happen faster because they have to put so much shit into this movie.
That's a big part of the Dune books is people's thoughts,
yes.
right? Half of the dialogue, quote unquote, in the books, in Frank
yes.
Herbert's books, are thoughts.
Yeah.
So I see why
it gets worse as not worse. It gets more pronounced,
more prevalent,
prevalent. The deeper into the books you go, by the way, until it's like basically only that.
Where are my feelings? I feel for no one. The second moon.
So,
yeah. so there is that, and I'm on the fence about it, but I think it works sometimes. It's not a bad way to do it, but we have the Gom Jabbar scene, right, where the Mother Gaius is testing Paul, and he puts his hand in the box. Although this time it's kind of like a lid, and he puts his hand in. I think the box in the Denis Villeneuve film looks much more sinister and creepy. I think they did it better there, but on this one, the thing that struck me was that the way. Because they really go all out with this, where the Reverend Mother is describing Paul's hand like burning up. Right in the new movie, he just feels it. In this one, she's like, and now you can feel the skin crisping and dripping and falling away. And I was like, I'm getting kind of hungry. Like the way she's describing this makes his hand sound delicious. Like it's
and that's how DoA became a cannibal.
It's grilling to perfection. I was a little bit disturbed that made me hungry, but she wanted to tell him what he was feeling. She really laid into the fear side of it,
I must not feel flesh.
I do feel crispy. Death brings talking obliteration. I will face my
Flesh. Dropping off.
Here.
Really
yeah, and look, the scenes are very similar. They're both well done. In both movies. It's an iconic scene in the book. It was really well executed, I think, in both of these films. It's one of the stronger scenes in the 1984 Dune. I think it basically nails it. So did Villeneuve. It's all good. Villeneuve was clearly watched this, was clearly inspired by it. He basically just takes the scene almost in its entirety.
Put your right hand in the box.
Hand in the box.
What's in the box?
I hold at your neck the Gom Jabbar. Poison needle. Instant death.
Your instincts.
The test is simple. Remove your hand from the box. And you die.
If you do so,
What's in the box?
you die.
Pain.
One of my notes was that this is Humming Sounds, the motion picture, because every scene has to have like multiple humming sounds coming from something. And it got a little bit grating after a while. I understand that we're in the future and there's a lot of machinery and machines cause humming sounds, but there was a lot of loud humming sounds throughout this film. I don't know if you noticed that too, but that was something that like stood out to me.
I did not, but now upon reflection, I see what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. So watch out for that. So anyway, they get to Arrakis, they get settled in, right? The Shadout Mapes warns them that there's danger coming, and I was like, I feel like I've seen that actress before, so I looked her up. Her name is Linda Hunt, and I don't know if I've seen her in really too many other things, but I did find out that she's actually the voice of the narrator in the God of War games. Interesting fact. So
I recognize that. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a little Dune 1984 God of War connection, which I didn't expect. It's an interesting factoid for you.
As far as actors' connections, Francesca Annis, who plays Lady Jessica, was also the weird spider monster in Krull, if you remember.
I do. That's another movie we got to go back and do some time. Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, hey, talk about moving up in the world, right? You have to be Lady Jessica, and then you get to be a spider monster. Because I think Krull came out after Dune.
No, it was 1 year before, 83.
Was it? Oh, okay. So Dune both at the same time. I don't know. So we get to we also have Max von Sydow in this as well, who plays what Liens the Fremen doctor.
Yes.
So
Liet Kynes. So one of the weirder things about the Villeneuve version was that they gender swapped Liet Kynes, which actually is a big deal because Liet Kynes is Chani's dad. So it was a very weird choice in the Villeneuve, because part of what is interesting about Chani is that she basically is half Fremen, but she's also half off-worlder, which allows her to make a better emotional connection, understand Paul. Because she comes from both sides, and Liet Kynes has been on that world for a long time and has adopted the Fremen customs, but he is a foreigner. And so it explains why Chani is so open to Paul in many ways. So it was a very weird decision on the part of the Villeneuve film to gender swap Kynes and then not have her be Chani's mom.
They could have still done that.
But they didn't.
I feel like they just decided, and I'm not necessarily opposed to them just kind of discarding that part of the story, that there's this familial relationship between Liet Kynes and Chani, because it does, her being only half Fremen does kind of open the door for why she would accept Paul more readily. But at the same time, you can also be like, well, she's just attracted to him or something like that too. You don't really need to take it any farther than that.
I mean, they didn't need to gender swap the character. Well, let's put it out. I was going to shove that one out there. I didn't have to do that one.
No, I guess they felt that, there wasn't, representation there that they wanted to achieve. But, so that kind of thing, like, I don't care about it that much. I'm more interested in like the Chani relationship that they cut out. But I'm kind of like, yeah, I suppose it works. I like the way they do it in the book better, where she has this other reason to sort of be like Paul's gateway into the Fremen society. I think it'd be better if they could have kept that. But as far as things you can change and remove without hurting too much, like, I think that's probably one of the easier ones to do. But yeah, in this one, they do stick close to the book where Liet Kynes is Chani's dad, and that becomes a little bit of an issue. Max von Sydow as well, in case you didn't know, is played the Three-Eyed Raven in Game of Thrones much later on. So there always has to be a Game of Thrones connection to everything we do on the show, apparently. So there's our Game of Thrones connection for this week. And he was also that old guy at the beginning of episode 7, The Force Awakens, that says it's time to set things right and then immediately dies. So there you go. I don't know what he's been in since then, but that's it. Yeah. So little Max von Sydow trivia for you.
Yeah, I mean, the cast is like actually a bunch of people who would go on to do many other things. Brad Dourif is in this as Piter de Vries, who's the Harkonnen Mentat, who did a bunch of stuff. You probably know as Grima Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I forgot about that. That's right.
Brad Dourif is in a ton of stuff. Linda Hunt, like as you mentioned, is in a ton of stuff. You have Kyle MacLachlan. So this was the start of his relationship with David Lynch, which then went into Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks. And, we just talked about him in Fallout. So if you haven't, he's one of the main characters in Fallout, the new TV series on Amazon Prime that we talked about in a previous episode of Nerd Legion. So a lot of like really quite famous or like at least well-known character actors are here. And then Patrick Stewart just appearing well before he was famous on screen. Right, he was primarily, a stage actor. Sting inexplicably cast in this movie.
I don't know why
is Sting in this movie. Who knows? Because he's famous, I guess.
He's got I don't know. Like, I don't feel like Sting was a big selling point in this movie because he's not really like Feyd-Rautha is not.
I mean, he was really famous in the 80s though for being part of the police. So
I guess, but he's not like a main character in Dune. Like Feyd-Rautha is not.
He was a main character in pop culture.
He's not a main character. Yeah, that is true. I guess it'd be like, I don't know what would the equivalent of this be in like modern day. Can you think of something where like a pop star or something with this is? It's almost like who's that?
It's like if Taylor Swift was Irulan in the new movie. It would be weird.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's. I think that's a good equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah. Approximately the same role or something like that, right? Okay. At least they didn't cast Ed Sheeran as Feyd-Rautha, or Post Malone. That could have been really
another
interesting.
Game of Thrones connection. Ed Sheeran was, had a bit part in Game of Thrones.
Post Malone as Feyd-Rautha.
Okay, I'm all for that. Actually, now that I think about that. Yep, Post Malone is faded. That's another great comparison. Yeah, that is the equivalent. Yep, or Post Malone is the Emperor of the Universe. Yep. Probably would have done a better job than
Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken. Sorry, Chris.
That was terrible casting.
Yeah, all right. But let's talk about Patrick Stewart more and his inexplicable carrying of the family pug into battle. Like, that's a famous gif. It's a famous gif. It's a famous scene there where he's like, for House Atreides and Tucledo or something like that. And he's like holding a machine gun in one hand and a pug in the other. And he's like, what? And they're like running. I'm like, why is he holding the pug? It's things like that in this film that just make me love it to death, because there's just no reason at all for him to be holding an adorable pug as he's leading the troops into battle, but he is, and I absolutely love that. I don't know why they did it, but I love it. It's an important pug. Pug Atreides is
there are very memorable things about this film. And with that, DoA, I have compiled a list of crimes against art, of which Dune 1984 is guilty. Are you ready?
Let's hear it.
Are you ready for the crimes against art? The first one is obviously Sting emerging with his teased bright red hair from his chamber, his cocoon, glistening with sweat in his leather underwear and flexing. One of them is the final scene in this movie with Patrick Stewart's skullet, which is a bald mullet. So the later scenes of Gurney Halleck, when he's fighting, when Paul and Feyd-Rautha are fighting, there are shots of Patrick Stewart's glorious skullet. That is a crime against art.
Trying to get a haircut on Dune.
There is a crime against art when all the Fremen are starting to ride the sandworms when they're trying to get ready to go to attack the Emperor, and the horrific Toto 80s pop rock soundtrack is playing as they are all mounting the worms to go into battle. It is incredibly terrible and incredibly jarring. And finally, the ultimate crime against art is perhaps the most painful 10 seconds in cinema history, where Alia, Paul's sister, comes in to meet the Emperor and starts mind controlling the Reverend Mother, and in a terribly delivered line says, "Get out of my mind."
That's right.
And then Alia says, "You will tell them both who I really am." And I'm like, this is the worst piece of dialogue and the worst delivery of this dialogue and the most absurd piece of dialogue I have ever seen.
Get out of my mind!
Not until you tell them both who I really am.
Alia.
Then she goes outside and has a dramatic shot where she's just like, this holding like a dagger, and I'm like, what is this? Like, what is this shot? This is your
oh, I forgot. The bonus crime against art was the womb scene.
Oh, yeah. That was gross. I mean, we've both seen babies come into the world, and it is nothing like that. It is an amazing experience, but it is not like that.
I just like the womb shot where they like go into the water of the womb and just like look at the fetus.
Yeah, I mean, as you do.
Just poke your head right in there.
At least there's no laser shooting orifice in that scene. I take my wins, But shall we talk about or did you have any more?
No. Do you have any crimes against art that you would like to level at this film?
Yes. The first one that stands out to me is Baron Harkonnen's disgusting skin condition. Why? Why do we need to see this? And he just like, his doctor seems to like really, get like arousal from treating this, and the Baron seems to be into it too.
Oh, beautiful, my Baron. Your skin, love to me. Your diseases lovingly cared for all eternity.
And I'm just and the
And he tells the Baron he's beautiful before the Baron just like randomly stabs the dude who's making the flowers in the weird green room.
Kind of like arousingly stabs him a little bit too, but he has to pull out his heart plug first. I'm like, there's all sorts of, they're just gross. And so you contrast the grossness of the Harkonnens with Sting's weird glistening body, and then the Baron Harkonnen's like laughter, and he's flying around like a balloon, like a big happy balloon. He just loves life in this. Very different than Stellan Skarsgård's portrayal of Baron Harkonnen. In this movie, Baron Harkonnen just sees a laugh a minute. Like, he is just having the greatest time ever.
Dude, this is the biggest comparison, because I think out of all the things that Villeneuve nailed, he nailed the Harkonnens and he nailed Giedi Prime the hardest. And
Definitely.
So the contrast between the menace, because the Harkonnens are still gross, right? But they're more like psychopathic gross. Or you have Stellan Skarsgård in like the black bath emerging and it looking all gooey and tarry. And in this
a little shower of ink in this one. You know, he's like, oh, a little bit, and I'm going to float around and laugh. Yeah.
But in this one, he's not even fat enough to really believe that he needs to float instead of walk. Like, that's the whole point, is that he is so morbidly obese in the book that he actually can't walk. And I actually don't think they went far enough with Stellan Skarsgård's character. Like, he should have been like 800 pounds, to be clear.
He looked like Jabba the Hutt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think maybe they didn't want to go that far. And they did really cool stuff with the costumes, with like that made him look bulbous with the long, like flowing black tail and everything while he's flying around. This one, he's just like a balloon, and he's clearly on wires, and it just looks so funny as he's like cackling, flying around the room. You just compare the ominous nature of the Villeneuve, Baron Harkonnen, where he's really intimidating when he's up in the sky. Right? When he's up in the ceiling. This one, he's just flying around in a circle on wires. I'm not scared at all of this guy.
It's like the end of Wizard of Oz or something. He's like, I can't get down. I don't know how it works. You know, it's like, it is very bizarre. They're hamming it up to the maximum. And they take that right into a scene, the Atreides mentat being captured and all that kind of stuff, where they poison him, and then in order to keep from dying to the poison, he has to milk a cat every day. But they go for it in the David Lynch film, because why not? And not only is it like a cat in a box, but they like have like a rat like duct taped to this cat, and like everybody's laughing the whole time. And it's just like, what is going on? Like, is there carbon monoxide in my home right now? Am I like losing consciousness? Am I hallucinating? And the answer is no. You're just watching Dune 1984. But
a poison has been introduced into your body through Fahawaz. By milking this smooth little cat's body, you receive your antidote. It must be done each day.
I mean, also, it's just very David Lynch. Right. It's very David Lynch. You have to understand who David Lynch is that he engages. I mean, his films are fundamentally absurdist. Right.
Right.
And so
he embraces the bizarre and strange and all that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's expected with David Lynch.
Mm-hmm. I feel like all of that, like the weirdness, embracing all that, makes it really strange that this movie, thematically is so different from the book and different from Denis Villeneuve's Dune, where this one, Paul is very much like a liberating hero, and it's very much like a hero's journey. He's like comes to the planet and saves the people and gets the girl in the end. And it's all very like vanilla Hollywood when it comes down to it, which is not like the book. Obviously, the book, you know, it's like a tragedy what's happening to the Fremen people, that they're going from one group using them to another group using them, you know, and they're kind of become the Atreides mercenaries across the galaxy, right? It starts this huge galactic bloodbath, you know. Dune's not a happy book, whereas this movie is very much like, we're just going to have a lighthearted kind of adventure thing almost, with this weird psychological element to it. And so you'd think with all the embracing of the weirdness and the disturbingness of the characters and the scenery, that he would have kept the more sinister vibe that the book has. So I was surprised. I didn't remember that from watching it back in the day. And I watch it this time and I'm like, oh, it's really just kind of like your average Hollywood thing. And it's funny because in the pop-up book, we're going back to the pop-up book. It has it has descriptions of things, and it says at the very end, scene 4, peace at last. I'll show you the pop-up for it. Here's the pop-up for peace at last. There you go. There it is in the throne room of the Emperor's ship, right? And let me read you the narration. It says, in the great hall of Arakeen Palace, the Atreides and their Fremen friends have gathered. Paul banishes the Emperor to a prison planet and promises a happy future to the people of Dune. And I'm like, well, somebody didn't read the book. Or else you did and you missed the point.
Well, I think maybe children may not be ready for that.
I guess. Which again brings us back to the strange nature of a Dune pop-up book. But but that vibe, the children's book vibe, is alive and well in the movie itself. In the 1984 movie, they totally gloss over all, like we talked about earlier, the political marriage to Irulan, the use of the Fremen as Paul's basically personal army now. The fact that like the Fremen prophecy is basically just this manufactured thing to control this populace that are good fighters, organized by the Bene Gesserit, right? So Denis Villeneuve nails that, and he nails those themes, and it's not happy, and it is very sinister, and it's kind of a tragic tale. But this movie just goes full,
it's temporarily tragic. To be fair, spoilers, in thousands of years, that actually does result in good things. It just has to go through the bad part first.
Sure, but like that bad part is like a main core, philosophy.
But you can't get to the good part without the bad part. So
sure, but I'm saying we got this movie is just like cake frosting, right? Where it's like, yay, Paul the hero, and so that was,
I agree.
That felt weird, with all the guitar riffs and everything like that. I love the scene in the last battle where the Emperor is like, oh, it's time to fight. And he runs over and he sits in that spinning carousel with his generals, and they're like trying to like shoot things, I guess. It's like, hey, remember that scene in the first Star Wars movie where they were in the Millennium Falcon shooting guns and stuff? And let's do that, but we'll just be in a slowly spinning like set of chairs. Like, why? Who would build this technology?
I thought it was so funny too, because the idea that the generals and the Emperor would be the one doing that. The Emperor spends nothing, he spends all his time in his generals just doing target practice. They don't do any administrative duties or actual ruling or management. They just sit in that chair and practice shooting the lasers all day.
Why does it spin? It's not like they're aiming at something. It's not turning to help them aim. It's just going around like a merry-go-round.
And the cannons we see are on the outside of the ship, stationary, all in a line, and yet they're all in a circle facing each other while it spins. I couldn't figure that out.
That's true. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. The cannons don't even move. Oh my gosh.
The cannons do. They have the barrels move, but the ship is not moving.
Emplacements.
Yeah, the emplacements move.
That's very weird. So while this is going on, kind of, we have the Paul versus Sting knife fight, and with the famous thing where like Sting keeps yelling, "I will kill him" the entire time, and you get a little bit of that because it's kind of from the books, but you get a little bit of that in the Denis Villeneuve film where basically Fedorov is like, I'm gonna kill him, but it's like sinister. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do this because I'm dangerous, and we know how dangerous it is because we've seen him murder people at random throughout the entire film, right? In this one, Thing is just like, doing his stage walk and being like, I will kill him, and then he just dies. Doesn't kill him. It's kind of a pathetic fight.
I will kill him!
They don't even Minecraft fight. They didn't even have the budget for the Minecraft suits. At the end of the movie,
thankfully they didn't, because there was at least fight choreography here, which was somewhat interesting to watch.
That's true. That is true. The choreography at the end, he was like, "Oh, thank goodness."
Imagine if the ultimate fight of this film had just been the Minecraft fight again.
It would have. I would not have been surprised. Yeah. Don't they at the end too? They say Paul is bringing peace and love to Dune. It's like, well, that's one way to look at it, I guess. Yeah.
Just ignore the ending. It's all fine, DoA. Everything's happy in the end.
Yep. That's right. And everybody clapped. The end. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot though about my other favorite fight sequence from this.
Oh.
Which was the incredibly terrible clone they did of Luke's lightsaber training from A New Hope with the droid,
right.
where he goes into the boxing ring with the spinning death machine that just has a bunch of spears attached to it that he has to flip around and then shoot all the individual spears off. And then my favorite part, DoA, was when one of the spears has like a saw on it and it's just the tip of the metal that catches fire somehow when he shoots it. And everybody's like, what precision. Whoa. Oh my God, he's so good at this, as he just like he just ducks and like steps back and uses a gun against this slowly moving spear robot.
Precise control.
Like I appreciate the ambition, but it's not a very good prop because like the spears shoot out, but then they kind of like they don't look dangerous because they stick out and then they wobble, kind of like you can tell it's like a cheap like wooden dowel or something as it goes like boing, you know. So it's like it's not a very good prop in execution, you know. So it kind of takes you out of it a little bit, and you're like, well, he just was fighting like Patrick Stewart, isn't that enough? Like, don't we need to we don't need the scene to show us that Paul's a good fighter. You can just have him fight Patrick Stewart and then be like, oh, you're so good.
We couldn't
Paul.
see that because of the Minecraft shields, though. So
right,
how would we know?
He had to fight the prop instead. Yeah, that's that. Yep.
Also, they're not concerned with his safety at all, right?
Yeah,
which is kind of amazing.
I did. I mean, he could have died, right? But they were listening. Oh, well, he deserves it, I guess, if he did. But I do like fast forwarding back to the end of the movie when Aaliyah, she gets Baron Harkonnen with probably the gum jabbar, I don't know, some sort of poison or whatever. And then he like, I guess she like pops his suit or something too, because he flies off randomly and he goes through a hole in the wall and then right into a sandworm. And you're like, that's a kind of like a Wile E. Coyote end for Baron Harkonnen. I don't know about that choice, but it was sure funny. I did laugh. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a deeply weird movie, and David Lynch has completely disowned this film. He refuses to talk about it. He's like trying to get his name off of it.
I can't blame him.
There were sequels to this plan, DoA, but it was such a bomb at the box office. This movie cost $40 million to make in 1984. This was an incredibly high budget film for that era.
Yeah, and again, you can tell an enormous amount of human effort was put into making this. You know, so it's sad when it turns out like this, because a lot of people worked very, very hard. And like we said, a lot of the costumes, a lot of the props, a lot of the scenery is very, very cool. There's a lot of interesting stuff in this, but yeah, it's just so goofy. It's so funny, and it's not supposed to be funny, but it just is funny. But there's just so much weird, bizarre stuff that just randomly happens in it. Like, I can't recommend this movie enough. Like, if you had any interest in the Denis Villeneuve Dune, you have to go watch this, because it is so different and so bizarre and like so entertaining. It's not a good movie, but it's so much fun to watch that I was thoroughly happy that we went back into this one, because it was so much fun to watch. Especially,
like you're saying, if you watched the other Dune films recently and enjoyed them and you already understand the story, like this is just hilarious in comparison. And there are certain things, like I think the work that it does with consciousness, like I said, and trying to reflect that in film is actually much better than Villeneuve's, because it's a core piece of the Dune books, and there are things that I really like about this movie. So it's not all funny, but it is very David Lynchian at times, and like a kind of eye-rollingly so. And the problem is that it's David Lynch applied to Frank Herbert's work, whereas like Villeneuve feels like he was built to make Dune. I mean, if you've seen his other films and the Arrival and the other work he's done in terms of science fiction, Blade Runner, you know, this felt like a logical step for him. And he feels much more, I would say, beholden to the source material, whereas David Lynch was just David Lynchifying it. And it feels weird to do that to this story.
I think we've seen time and time again that like the directors that are true to the original source material make the best stuff. Lord of the Rings is a great example of that as well. Where
For adaptations, I mean, I love David Lynch. Mulholland Drive, I love, right? I think he's brilliant, but he has to be doing his own stuff, right? Not adapting other people's works.
Exactly. Yeah. Obviously, David Lynch is a very talented director, and but when you're doing something like Dune, or something like Lord of the Rings, something that's so big and so beloved, you really have to stick to the source material and adapt it in a way that's logical for the screen, and stay true to the spirit of it, right? And not just make it your own. There's that whole phrase like, oh yeah, got to make it your own. A lot of times you really don't need to make it your own if you're doing something like this. The Wheel of Time show on Amazon is a great example of how making it your own will ruin something, because that first season of that show especially is garbage, right? It's such a waste of a lot of talented actors, actually. So Dune was a good lesson in that too, where it's like, you might have a unique vision for the way cinema should be done, but if you're adapting something, like, stay true to the source stuff, right? You will get a better product out of that, and you'll still be able to have your influence on it. People will still be able to see it's you. Lord of the Rings is still very Peter Jackson, but it's also primarily very Lord of the Rings, which is what it should be because it's Lord of the Rings. But as far as positives for this movie goes, Kyle MacLachlan is great. I thought, like, I'm a big fan of his for a lot of things he's been in. This was his first big role. I watched a thing where he was talking about his roles the other day, and he was saying that, like, coming into Dune, he was a big fan of the book, and so he was really excited to play Paul Atreides, and that comes through in his performance. Like, he's all in on this, But then this was also the start of his relationship with David Lynch, and apparently the way he tells it, there was like a moment where he kind of was like really nervous on set, and he was like, I don't think I can do this scene and all that, and David Lynch like talked him through it and like really helped him and really believed in him, and that like helped launch his whole career, right? So I think Kyle MacLachlan's success in this film individually is such a fun thing to watch too, because he nails it as Paul Atreides. I think he does a great job.
Your time has come. A storm is coming. Our storm. And when it arrives, it will shake the universe.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think most of the acting is the issue here. It's the way that the parts that the actors are given, because Baron Harkonnen is so cheesy in this. And Rabban, I mean, it's basically Rabban and Baron Harkonnen and Fade Rotha just look like the Three Stooges at points in this.
They're comedy relief almost.
Yeah, they're comedy relief almost, which is like a very weird decision, because they are supposed to be menacing and evil. Right.
Theoretically. Yeah, they should be.
Which is what we get in the Villeneuve version, but there's really nothing menacing about these characters. They seem like idiots and pushovers a lot of the time. Yeah. And especially Rabban, who, by the way, remember that his nickname is the Beast, because he is supposed to be so terrifying and brutal. And in this, he's a stooge.
Give me spice! Drive them into utter submission. Do not show the slightest pity or mercy. Never stop. Go! Show no mercy!
Yeah, we get a much better version of it in the Denis Villeneuve.
I mean, I don't even really like his portrayal in the Villeneuve version, because I think Batista is kind of like one note, but it's way better than this.
I think it works in the Denis Villeneuve one, because he is threatening, but also like just unstable too. Where it's like he's so aggressive and he's so beastly to a certain extent that he doesn't think plans through. So yeah, I think it works. I think that's a good portrayal of it. But this one, yeah, he's just comedy relief. He's like, this is a villain on the same level as like Bulk from the Power Rangers, where it's like he's a big chunky guy who likes to eat and bully people, and it's like that's our that's our guy, I guess. But yeah,
that's a hell of a comparison.
It's the same character, So there's a lot of that, but I don't know. In conclusion, we got to also talk about how this movie proves that the way Denis Villeneuve did Aaliyah in the new films was the way to go, which is where you just don't have her in it because it's just too weird. It's just too off-putting to have this little kid be like the way that she was.
David Lynch existing film. Because it'd be very hard to find the right child actor, because she's supposed to have all of the memories of all of her female ancestors, right? So she basically is an old woman in a child's body. So finding the right actor for that, but it just ends up being super cheesy on screen, which is very much proven here, and I agree. And also it required that time gap where there was that, narration. It's like 2 years later when they were destroying, they were fighting and they were destroying all the spice harvesters and blah blah blah. And then we fast forward to, the part where she looks like she's like 5 maybe, but they said she grew really quickly because of the water of life. Anyway, they just glossed over it. Whatever.
Yeah.
But it's really terrible in this film. And so to not only just not have that time skip, I think was really good in the Villeneuve movie, because it keeps the kind of the flow of the film working better. And then having Alia there, but communicating from within the womb was actually a really cool idea, and a very Dune-esque idea, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, because you had this fetus that like had this presence, right? But obviously it was still growing normally, right? So you could have that strangeness while keeping it visually within the realm of reason, right? So that's whereas like again, David Lynch was in this case just doing what was in the book, but when you're adapting literary work like this, you got to know what to keep, you got to know what to change. This is one of those things where I think you definitely need to change it, because even in the book you're like, this is weird. And like on the screen, even weirder. So one last little note there. Yeah, because I felt like we had to bring up Aaliyah. But
yeah, we did. I mean, I kind of did in my Crimes Against Art with her terrible line and her using the voice, which is probably the worst part of her entire arc.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, stop talking, kid. Like my ears are bleeding, I think. But that comparison with how the 1984 film did it versus the 2023 film did it, I think is important to bring up. But yeah, also we didn't mention Stilgar at all, because he's really not in this very much, and he never once says Lisa.
I'll bring up Stilgar as part of another complaint. So one of the weirder things that I noticed about this film, DoA, is that it's almost shot like an 18th century period piece, if you know what I mean. It's a lot of dialogue at the beginning and close-ups on people's faces and this kind of soft lighting where it looks like I'm watching Pride and Prejudice at times and not a sci-fi movie, which is a very weird feeling. So it feels like a British 18th century period film, which just the shooting style makes it very strange to watch. And on top of that, remember that Stilgar and the Fremen are supposed to be a different culture, but the way that they cast this movie was just a bunch of late 70s and early 80s white dudes with 70s and 80s white dude hair. And you don't get the sense, because obviously the Fremen are supposed to be inspired by Arabic speaking cultures, right? And you don't get that at all in this movie.
No, it's cast in a pretty typical fashion to the movies of its time, for sure. And yeah, you don't really get, the difference in culture at all. It's just like you went to just a different town a couple miles over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was just a different town full of British people, but the Fremen didn't come across in this film as like very unique or foreign to Paul, right? It was just more people that Paul could instantly connect with, basically. And you really got that in the Villeneuve, where it's like, oh no, this culture is really different and you need to learn what the new rules are and how these people interact. And you have to ingratiate yourself and become integrated into that culture. Nah, it's just here. He's just like, oh, you're just more bros. Let's go.
Yeah, it's like, oh, he gave us the sound weapons. Like when they're all on top of the sandworm being like, cha-cha, and like shooting things and all that. I'm like, oh, I can't take these sound weapons. Yeah. So dorky. But
indeed.
That's this film. It's dorky, and I even have a note that says cha-cha guns. So that's, that's it. But that's it, I think, for Denis Villeneuve's 1984, not Denis Villeneuve, David Lynch's 1984 Dune. We'll edit that out. We're not going to edit that out.
No, I'm not edit.
No, we're not going to edit that out. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. But it was a thoroughly entertaining watch through. I'm very, very glad we did it, because when it comes to these films that you haven't seen in like 20 plus years, like you don't know if you're really remembering it the right way. And I am pleased to report that I remember this film in exactly the right way, and that it was really bizarre, not very good, but thoroughly entertaining. And yeah, absolutely, if you have any interest in Dune at all, go back and watch it. It is such a interesting take on the book. It's definitely worth watching.
And now's the time to do it. This is the fun time to do this rewatching right after you're all hyped up on the new version of Dune. It's a great comparison piece. You will have a good time. You know, have some adult substances that may be legal in your state but federally illegal with your friends. And
wait, is spice slang for a real drug? I don't even know. Don't have if it is,
some of
don't
the
have
spice
that.
melange.
The sleeper has awoken.
Do not turn into a Space Guild navigator. That's too much spice melange, guys.
No,
Keep it easy.
no.
Keep it easy.
You're gonna get a weird orifice if you do that. Yeah.
So only a little bit of the spice melange, and do enjoy David Lynch's Dune. Next week we'll be back with X-Men 97. Now that it's entirely done, so we'll see you then.
Yeah, I will say I watched the first episode of that. Awesome.